For consideration of Awesome Games Done Quick 2024, this is a speedrun submission for the Trench Run Skip category of Star Wars Trilogy, Princess of the Force for the Game Boy Advance. This category is a pretty interesting one. It was found completely on accident thanks to a runner that I will talk about later, or when we get the chance to. But the first thing I'm going to do, as a requirement in order to get the Trench Run Skip itself, we have to start off by doing a replay of one of the parts of the game, which of course in this case, in order to get what we're looking for, we have to replay through the speeder chase on Endor in episode 6. So we're going to do that right now. One of the nice things about doing this particular one is that there is really no pressure to be perfect with the first speeder chase, and you can kind of sandbox it as long as you complete it. It's not about how well you complete it, it's just that you get it completed and then you proceed to the run as normal. So yeah, we'll get that started. And in ordinance with the proof-keeping requirements for this category, every runner is required to showcase the speeder sequence beforehand, as it's part of what causes the game to behave the way it does. I would highly recommend showing it off beforehand and then reminding viewers throughout that first part of episode 4 that the speeder chase sequence that we did beforehand will play into importance later into the run. Now, normally we could have decided that this could be played into the regular beat the game category, but what we decided amongst the community is that because it requires you to complete the game first before you can, even access it, it warranted having its own category because of the way it impacts the new save file. It almost acts sort of like a new game sort of plus setting, if it's intended by the developers, that is. So, again, we're in a situation right now where we're just setting up. It's okay if the run accidentally dies in this setup sequence. Timer's not running, so we're not really concerned about that much. Yeah, and we're okay. We're fine. It's good we get the rust out of the way, and some good practice on how the way the Scout Trooper AI operates. It has a bit of what I believe would be some rubber banding to it, and it's pretty hardcore. It seems like some of the AIs for the Scout Troopers are meant to be very easygoing at first, while others will put up a lot of resistance, like the one you saw beforehand. So that is certainly a thing to keep in mind. So we're done with the setup for the required trench run skips. So what we do next is we erase another file. Doesn't matter which file it is, as long as it's one of the files above or below it. So we're doing that right now. And before I begin, I just want to preface by saying that it's going to be a fast-paced action adventure platformer game, so it should be a good time. Give our 3-letter name, doesn't matter what, I don't know. Usually just AAA because it's the fastest setup in between runs if you lose attempts, which, considering how lengthy of a game this is, you don't expend too many attempts per session like shorter games usually would, so but yeah, with everything kind of rolled out of the way and a bit of an explanation behind why the category is named as such, I guess we'll get the run started. We'll start in 3, 2, 1, go. So Trench Run Skip is a little bit different from the usual category. With these intro sequences per episode, you have to spam the start button in order to complete the opening credit sequence. With these cutscenes, all you have to do is spam A and B to get out of them. And we are now Luke Skywalker, which is pretty cool. The very first room in the game, it's just kind of getting you familiarized with the basic controls and such. And it kind of sets up parameters for what to expect going into the rest of Episode 4. So you get to use your blaster a lot, and it's pretty cool. And we will make our way into the first, what I call proper level, which is, of course, you know, the Tusken Raiders section. We spend a lot of time in Episode 4 on the planet Tatooine, and our first enemies are pretty easygoing. They're Tusken Raiders. They hit heavy, but they're pretty easy to kill. As you can see by the taunt, they can be taken down really easily. So if they taunt like that, it's a one-hitter. If it's not a taunt, it's a standard two-killer. So you do not have to kill them all, but you have to kill the ones that are required to get through the what I call the enemy sequence, or a battle sequence, as I would also put it. That jump has some leniency. So that worked out nicely, actually. I had a lot of taunts that time. I decided to play a little bit safer on that first sequence. And the reason I decided to play it a little bit safer on the stairs climbing section is just because if you miss the jump there, you will lose about 3 to 5 seconds. There's 2 stair sections that are kind of like that. This is the second one of 2. So you can barely reach it. And we're going to set up a pretty easygoing strat where we go up to the ledge, fight the boss that way. And that does set up a fairly consistent way to get through that first major boss, which is just a regular old Tusken Raider. So we're through there. No issue on that section. Things are going to get a little bit more complicated as we go into this next section, as the game Star Wars Trilogy introduces different elements and also R2-D2, which is always a good time. For this first section, we're just going to kind of walk, because if we get too far away from R2, R2 will start to complain about how far away it is from you, so we don't want to stress it out too much. And this is the introduction of the green blaster ammo. As you can see, the green blaster ammo, generally it's a one-hitter, or it's a two-hitter for some enemies. And, well, yeah. It's pretty convenient to have it when we do. We try to grab it as much as possible. It does make our life easier. Now, I did gloss over 2 things. R2, everyone's favorite. That's a bit of sarcasm. Oops, pause there. R2 has the tendency to be pretty slow. And so in R2 sequences, that's one thing we have to mind, because it does impact each of the cycles we get on, 1, elevators. Another thing that it impacts is, if we try to enter a door too early, we'll get a bit of a text that says, R2, I can't leave you behind, or something of that sort. So we kind of have to just walk with R2 in order to not lose sight of it. And it's just, it's one of the least favorites of most speedrunners. But we'll be done with R2 for a handful of minutes. We can just abandon the droid at the end of this particular sequence. Another technique I did gloss over a little bit, because I deviated a bit to something else, is the rush technique, or dashing. Now, dashing is going to be a big speedrun tech for this game, and it's got some interesting properties here. So you can see, if you don't get the dash precisely, you will fall over. You may sometimes have the tendency to sort of have a very, very short jump. If set up precisely, you can also have a really lengthy jump. If you set it up too quickly, you will sometimes have the tendency to fall into other pits, places that you shouldn't be. So it's important to have your precision tech on the dashing down, because it can result in some important, in some crucial mistakes. Alright, this is good. Unfortunately, I had too little health. That is one thing you do have to mind in this game, is how much HP you have. We're going to try to skip it again. And we did. Normally what would happen is we would be able to grab the health pack from that one stormtrooper, but they ended up being a little too far away from me. And now we can kind of go for a really risky series of jumps there. So pretty low on health, but we should be fine here. There is some tech where you can dash and immediately enter the door, but I'm not going to go for that right now. Because oftentimes if you miss it, you'll end up going way too far away from the door, and it looks very awkward. A perfect example of what I'm talking about. So, one thing I did not mention is that normally you would pick up the box, and it would have some faster, better blaster ammo, which I did not. Okay. So with those long stair sections, that's about So with the long stair sections in those games, it's usually about 3 seconds of climbing followed by the usual fair. And then a lot more of those blasting sequences. Ooh, that's a mistake I don't normally make, which is fine. It demonstrates the precision in the platforming that one needs to have in order to play this game. And two of the most important things to know about this game, one of them, of course, being the stormtrooper patterns. The reason I say that is because it can save you a lot of time being able to have a good handle of those. With the other major importance just being how efficient you are with the dash tech. And just in case you thought that was a little bit off, yeah, that is Boba Fett, 1 episode early. We can make this work just fine. There we go. So another mechanic that the series introduces is the ability to somersault, and that gets us under different objects. And it comes in handy for these sections in certain parts of episode 4. Alright. That's the one that takes 4. There were some unusual stormtroopers where they will take 4 hits. Most of them are marked pretty clearly as to which ones will take 4 damage, but sometimes you just don't know until you've played it through before. There are two laser sections. I'm going to start on one side. So that's the end of one side, and then we move on to the other. Casual players may have some difficulty sort of figuring out which section to start with first. And a lot of it just has to do with like not being as familiar with how the game works. And then on the other side, we have 2 stormtroopers each, and then we have a few rehearsed patterns like so. Once you get really good at the game and play it regularly, you get pretty adjusted to how each of the patterns operate. A lot of players will forget to hit that switch before entering through the door. It's not a costly time loss, but it does lose you about 2 to 3 seconds. You get a little bit of waiting time to think about what to do next. And that's another interesting thing about this game here. As you can see, I had like an idea of what to do, but sometimes the Stormtrooper AI will just have an entirely different objective of what they want, and you don't get much of a choice behind some of it. As long as you get the hits on some of the rehearsed Stormtroopers right away, for the most part they act pretty normal. They walk into danger without any fear. They'll have some Stormtroopers, if you don't get them right away, they will sometimes have some very interesting AI patterns. Now, gonna make sure I grab that first. And you got to see a pretty good example of what bad patterns look like. Okay, that one was kind of reasonable. we're going to kind of try to purposefully hold on to some of our blaster ammo as much as possible. And then grab the next set. Alright, that worked out alright. Alright. For some reason, you can just... Interesting. Okay. One thing I did discover is that you don't have to actually kill that the stormtrooper on the top of that platform right there. What you do need to make sure you have is enough ammo and health to make it through. And these patterns are pretty standard once you know what you're doing. I will have to say that because of how high action this game is, I can commentate some of it, but I will need to definitely have some help with the commentary. So people that have like an idea of the basic concepts of the game will certainly be more than good enough. Because as far as platforming goes, it's important for me to stay very focused on the game itself. The game is very entertaining on its own terms. I'll say that right from the gate. There are a lot of very unusual patterns that you see from stormtroopers that you would not normally get to see. And some things just fill themselves in. So having additional commentators to sort of be in awe of certain things happening the way they do, like that for example, can certainly allow moments where questions are asked of like, why did that happen? Why R2 missed out on the elevator cycle? Well, the reason for that is because it's a very, very speedy elevator cycle. Also, that right there is emulating the original cutscene from Star Wars Episode 4, where a single stormtrooper is killed. One of the few cases where we don't need to grab the blaster ammo. R2 moves at a certain speed, and if it is not close enough to the platform, it will just miss it outright. Now, a character that it has a lot more usefulness than R2-D2 is Princess Leia. Princess Leia has a blaster, and she has you covered defense-wise. And one of the best things about her is that if she takes damage, and you take damage, and you happen to pick up health drops, she also recovers HP just like you do. So, very convenient in that way. We got a bit of a preordained cutscene that we have to make it through, so we're going to do that right now. Blast the area. Just needs to be a certain distance away from the wall, as you can see. This is one of those sections of the game that if you weren't warmed up in the dashing by now, you will be afterwards. If there is any particular section of Star Wars Trilogy that really teaches you a lot about stormtrooper patterns, it's going to be this particular section. And you start to really get a good idea of where the stormtroopers will make their entrance, at what way, at what speed. As you get used to those timings, you'll get a lot better at sort of sensing them out. And this is a very straightforward section once you understand how it operates, so we're done here. Not too much time loss there. One place where there can be some pretty major time loss is going to be the TIE Fighter roundup. So we need to play it very carefully, which I'm going to do, of course, by staying at a normal speed. You can get a fairly good kill rate on each of the TIE Fighters if they will, you know, of course, cooperate. For example, that didn't take too long. If you're lucky, you can sometimes, like, get as many as, like, 3 kills immediately. One thing you have to be worried about is that pattern right there. If you collide with the TIE Fighters themselves, they'll move you into this a bit of a temporary spin. So it's very much like a by the risk sort of decision making. So if you ever feel like you're a little too low on HP, you can certainly run away. That is a safe option that will be respected, as it gives you time for R2 to recover some of your HP. One of the times it's R2 is useful. So it's a lot of this just sort of adapting and reading what types of AI patterns you get from the TIE Fighters. What I'm going to do right now, because of my HP, is I'm going to kind of just weave a bit around as if I were lassoing in one of the TIE Fighters. This is a very safe way to sort of lull it in and then chase it out. So, yep. There we go, that's one. Gonna chase this one while I get some HP back. And then I'm gonna kind of lasso these 3. And by the lassoing motion, you can pretty easily get at least one of them, if not 2, and sometimes in rare cases you'll get as many as 3. The worst thing that can happen is you will just get kicked to the curb by the TIE Fighters sometimes, and you don't always get much of a choice in the matter of how it works. Okay, so there's one more. We should be safe. I am low on HP, but since this is the trench run skip category, I shouldn't be too worried about that. This was not half bad for a TIE Fighter roundup. It could have been a lot worse. So because this is trench run skip, and what we did with that speeder chase sequence, we're skipping straight to this cutscene. Darth Vader's going to kind of just shoot back and forth. Once you know how it operates, you can just go up and down. Certainly looks like it's a futile effort, but very fortunately, an old friend of ours has our back. Yeah, it looks like I was going to be in danger, but it turns out I'm A-okay. So that is episode 1. And so, one of the lovely things about this category is that you don't have to deal with the trench run, which has a lot of unpredictability, and it's one of the toughest sequences in episode 4. Up there with the TIE Fighter roundup, of course. So now we're moving on to episode 5, and things get interesting in a different way. So, blaster patterns are really easy to learn. One thing that you have a lot of liberty with is how you do lightsaber tech. So you might notice this particular section here, I am sometimes purposefully slowing down. One thing I do feel it's important to note is that sometimes, while speedrunning as fast as possible in this game is really satisfying, there are some places where it's very important to take it easy, just a slight bit. Because a lot of what comes into play in the later episodes that you want to condition yourself to is being ready for unexpected pitfalls. One thing that you can normally anticipate in slower platformers, or platformers that scale a little bit slower looking, is just knowing where you are. So, in Super Mario World, or like something in the Mario series, or perhaps even like, I'm trying to think of another good example. Perhaps I could call back to, something like DuckTales, actually. Yeah, that would be another good example. Because of the way the screen scrolls, it's pretty easy to tell where you are relative to where you're going to be next. This sort of game is comparable with its scaling speed to that of, say, like Sonic the Hedgehog, where you're moving... The platforming is very fast. You can sometimes have, like, spare seconds to sort of anticipate what's coming up. And so, you have to sort of take that into effect in order to, you know, stay alive. That is a great example of when to anticipate certain things. So we're going to move to the other side. And we're done with the cave. So those purposeful moments of slowdown are just to make sure that you don't have to, like, repeat an entire section again. Because if you repeat a section, it can sometimes be as much time loss as, say, about 30 seconds to as much as 3 minutes, depending on where you are in the game. In some of the earlier sections, the time loss is not as devastating. But in the later episodes, the consequences of losing a life can be a lot more detrimental, so... This is one of the rare moments where we'll bring the blaster back, is for these search robot droids, having the green blaster is going to be very useful. And then we'll switch back to lightsaber. There's going to be one more instance where we're going to switch back, and I'll talk about it when we get there. So I was playing it actually very safe there. Speaking of places to play it very safe. That particular section right there, if you dash and you don't anticipate the jump, the pit will swallow you alive. And before we move on, we want to make sure that that snowtrooper is good as dead. Because if we don't, it's going to spell certain time loss. You'll be sitting there like, why am I still... Why am I losing time? Why is the sequence not ended? And that's because of things like that. So that's one scary part of Hoth. And actually, Hoth is like the first major scary part of this, like, next two parts of the game, or the next two episodes. First part of it's because there's a lot of unexpected pitfalls that you don't always anticipate at first. The second part is this section here, AT-AT. And you would think it's pretty easy, as it is an auto-scroller, but one thing that you have to bear in mind is this health pack right here. It's very important to have. These health packs are very, very crucial to grab, as it allows you to take a lot more risk later on in each of the episodes. Speaking of risk, that looks very risky, but it works every single time. I like to call it the leap of faith. Because if you set it up at the right timing, you will hit it 100% of the time. And because the game is feeling generous, they offer you some ammo in the form of snowtroopers. Another thing that can certainly lose you a lot of time here is because it's an auto-scroller, it takes a long time to make it through said auto-scroller. So if your nerves are starting to enter overdrive, and you start to get anxious or nervous while playing through this section, you can sometimes make some unusual mistakes. So it takes a bit of some sort of conditioning and just refining your ability to keep cool under pressure in order to get through it. Last leap of faith, and we made it. That one looks a little bit easier. The first one looks like it's literally impossible, but again, like the first leap of faith, the second one works the same. We just have to make it through one last AT-AT unit, and then we'll be on our way towards our starship. So that's one of them, and then this is the last foot. So there we go. One more dash, and we're through. And now we just got to enter through the door. This is the last really particularly scary sequence of Hoth coming right inside here. So another thing about this game is that platforming is a really big thing in this particular section here. So what we're going to do to play it a little bit safe is we're going to shoot that stormtrooper right over there. And that will allow us to not have to cross platforms that particular time. And then cross to the other side. We could try to do it the normal way, but I have too many instances where I have accidentally fallen into the pit while dashing. And I left that one for last, not on purpose, but as long as you're efficiently moving your way through each of the phases, it should be fairly easy not to forget it, as long as you know it's there. And yeah, that's Hoth. No incidents that particular time, so that's good. So with that done, we got to do some force training with Yoda. But more importantly, it gives us a chance to really begin to sort of sandbox with our newest technique, which is, of course, double jumping. Comes in at a perfect time, honestly. And we'll get to listen to Yoda talk. One thing about the training sequence is that you get to learn how to use the force push, which there are very particular instances where we use it. It's there, but we really don't have to use it after this particular sequence. Even not that much in this sequence either. So that first one's pretty easy. If you saw those little green pools of algae and water and muck, if we fall in there, we'll get kind of chided around by Yoda for being reckless. But we're speedrunners. We like to be reckless very naturally. That's a perfect example of being reckless. We're going to play it a little bit safe here. Go. Nice. So normally we'd have to anticipate getting a jump like that because it does cut very close in that particular sequence. And then one hit on Darth Vader and that'll do the trick. So not bad. Again, certainly some parts of that I played safe. So now we got another difficult part of the game, which is Cloud City. Cloud City is also a really cool part of the game. One thing that you get to learn a lot about is just which lightsaber tech is going to be super efficient to use. And that is one of the big things that one of the big things about Episode 5 and 6 is the more lightsaber techniques you gain the ability to use gives a lot more creativity over how you handle each of the fight sequences. Okay. A little weird. I was meaning to uppercut the Stormtrooper. And, you got to see why you want to wait on R2 before you enter through doors. Oh, that was beautiful. I don't often get to see it that way. So, you got to see the new sort of circular slash technique. It's a nice little technique that allows you to save a good amount of time. This is the last sequence we have with R2-D2 in the game. A former world record holder at the time by the name of Smart Alec had a nickname for R2-D2, and that's Slow 2-D2, which, yeah, it's an accurate name. Another technique that we get access to is, of course, hammer slash. So we don't actually have to kill all the stormtroopers here, just a few, just the ones that are required. Because I saw where the droids were and the stormtrooper was in that instance, I opted to take a bit more of a horizontal slash technique. So I'm gonna kind of just do each of the usual kills that I do for one of these. And this is where patterns start to come into play. I'm gonna start by killing one of them right there, right now. And then this next one, head over here. And that's one of the most efficient ways to handle that particular place. So with that particular stair section, I like to start by conquering the side further away from the entrance first, because generally you will not have any more stormtroopers to worry about afterwards on that particular section. So one thing you have to be very careful about is this one pit here. If you're tactical enough, you don't have to really worry about getting killed off or shot by that one stormtrooper. Just kind of waiting very patiently. And we got some waiting to do right here. Then follow through the laser doors as follows. Make sure to hit that switch, and we're through. that's about as efficient of a pattern as you can get for that one. So sometimes, in certain scenarios, if our HP is really low in that section, we'd purposefully take a death on that very first pitfall. So one of these safer methods is to just take that section one side at a time, and it's a really easy way to keep yourself from losing control over each of the areas. That did end up being the last one. All right. Go, got that. So we're in the very last room of the Cloud City section. So with that section completed, we are now going to fight my father, because yes, that is the thing we're doing. So one thing you have to worry about in this fight, it's always very possible to fall into the carbonite pit right there. So as long as you have the jump prepared and you don't have like the control stuck down, you can very easily get through that first phase without much of an issue. And destroy some droids and stormtroopers and get into phase 2, which is a lot of jumping. We're looking for particular patterns where you can get the door section to break as much as possible. I'm getting some less than desirable ones. This is one of these slower door patterns I've seen so far. There we go. There appears to be 2 pieces of shrapnel that need to hit that outer area. So the reason I manipulated Vader's control to the other side like that is that this particular sequence goes a little faster by bringing Vader to the right side. And it depends on how quickly he'll cooperate for you, of course. So now we're done with episode 5. We're moving on to episode 6. And so now with all the lightsaber tech learned, most of the other abilities introduced, we are going to get into some of the more intensive fighting slash healing balance areas. So now we have force healing. It won't be as much of a utilized ability here, since we can kind of just pedal our way through each of the Gamorreans. They deal a lot of damage, but one thing you can do to anticipate that is to make your way quickly through them. And then another big thing about fighting the Gamorreans in these required fight sequences is a combination of circular slash, hammer slash, and uppercutting is going to be the biggest way to avoid any trouble whatsoever. And we'll be kind of making our way through each of the fight sequences as follows. So it may seem like a bit of an issue that there's a lot of Gamorreans on each of the sides, but you can minimize the damage pretty heavily as long as you're dashing back and forth. I'm going to purposely do some force healing here. It's not going to be much, but it's going to be enough where we can sort of not have to worry about healing later on. And then again, more fighting here. This one's pretty much like be very much in that dash circular spin pattern ASAP. And then we got one sequence with Boba Fett. Get through that no problem. And then we get to one of my favorite fight sequences where you really get the chance to just show the Gamorreans who's boss. And that's that. No deaths on that one, fortunately. One thing that can be a source of RNG pain is this lovely little mini boss fight. It's the Rancor, everyone's favorite creature from episode 6. And we get to fight it, because of course we do. So, one thing we're going to be focusing on is taking a little bit of damage. The reason we're doing that, I'm getting a sort of access to these little falling rocks right here in order to manipulate the Rancor into this corner right here. You can see the switch that I'm right next to here. And that allows us to hit the Rancor a little bit and then end the fight that way. There we go. Not my fastest completion, but it certainly looked pretty good. So now we got another auto-scroller sequence. That one's not too bad. And the biggest thing to focus on with the auto-scroller sequence here is to make sure that Boba Fett is not becoming a Boba threat. So by making sure you deal as much damage to Boba Fett as possible, within reason, of course. And then working your way through each of the Gamorreans. And making sure you don't fall into these little pit areas, because that can happen too, even if the pits are really small. That Sarlacc is very hungry. And here's Boba Fett. It's really easy to sense where Boba Fett's going to come out. And a lot of this fighting here is based heavily around hammer slashes. And that's that sequence. Ooh, hey. Sometimes you get used to anticipating where the we're going to purposely take a little damage here, because we can exit through the area pretty early. And then make sure we grab this final health pack. This section is pretty easy. Bunch of uppercuts. And there are certain sequences that are pretty rehearsed consistently the same way. And that's one of those sections. So we got a few more Gamorrean fights, and then we'll be on our way to Planet Endor. Again, this pit here, we need to be careful. Even though it is smaller, it is still possible to fall in. One of our best runners has done it before, so yeah, you just want to be ready to deal with it. We got a few more jumps to go, and then we'll be done with this section. So there we go. That's that. That went really nicely. I actually gold split it on that one, so that's cool. Pretty nicely done. So now we're getting to the scariness that is Endor, and it begins with the same speeder sequence that we set up at the beginning. Unlike the first one when we were just setting up, we do want to make sure that we are doing our best to take as little damage as possible. That's a great example of taking very little damage. So we don't have much to help us if we get in trouble. We have a blaster attached to the front of our speeder, and the ability to ram our scout troopers into the sides, like this. And it seems like there's like certain amounts of rubber banding where one of the AIs will be very difficult, and then the other one will be extremely cooperative. So you have to bear in mind when the AI is being stubborn, especially when you have little obstacles like these. And so far, we're doing pretty okay with that. There are certain segments like this where you can just kind of focus on going from scout trooper to scout trooper without much of an issue, because they will leave you time to take out the current scout trooper you're on. This one's coming up soon enough on the next segment. Yes. There we go. The first few ones will always show up like so, right from behind. And sometimes they will be really easy to destroy like that, without much resistance. Others will try to fight against you really heavily. And then others like that, you have the opportunity to shoot a few of them. So we do take as much of an opportunity to dispose of those ASAP. We got one more segment to go in this speeder section, so I think I'll try to risk it for the biscuit here. Alright, that's one out of the way. Here are the difficult two coming up right now. Ooh, we are in a little trouble. I might die here. Would it be the end of the world? No. I would prefer to stay alive, if at all possible. Nice. Ooh, not so nice. That's fine. It's expected on most runs that you will sometimes just die on that last segment. One, either because you're not paying attention to the area. So we'll just run it back. Unfortunately, it's the last section. Usually the stormtroopers don't put up too much resistance beyond more than 3 lost lives, so this is fine. This is perfectly reasonable. As long as we are focused on, getting them into the obstacles as quickly as possible, then working our way through these last 2, and like that, we're done with the speeder chase. That was a business as usual speeder chase right there. Not too much out of the ordinary. It's very normal on most runs that I've seen, even some of the best runs, to have at least 1 or 2 deaths. Eventually, the runs will move on to more perfect ones, but one of the balances with that one, got a little scared there, is that sometimes you will have to just kind of concentrate on whether you prioritize You'll have to concentrate between health management and making sure that you're making your way through the section as fast as possible. Some of that is done through force blitzing, like I showed in one of the encounters, and others of it's just, you know, finding the most swift and speedy methods to get through each of the stormtroopers. And hammer slashers for these types of encounters is very efficient, gets the job done without taking too much damage. And that's section number 1. That one's not too costly. We are going to get to the ones where things get a lot more devastating if we miss everything. Alright, so far pretty standard fare. I'm going to opt to sort of kill them like so. And then we're going to be introduced to our next enemies. You notice the hyena-looking creatures, or doggos as I might call them. But now we got killer flying moth-looking bees. They're fantasy creatures, fantasy sci-fi creatures in a Star Wars game, so, you know, that could really honestly be anything. I'm going in the right direction? No, I'm not. The reason I said that is because there is one section where you do go in that direction, but not this time. Here we go. Do a dash and a jump. There we go. Another section done. So those swinging platforms that you just saw there, they will become much more dangerous later on. I'm just waiting for when it starts to get a little scary. Most of the time the cutscene will stop you from getting killed like so. Because if you don't have the you will just fall in. So that was confusing the previous section with this section here. Yeah, that's why. And another thing about the scaling of the worlds and each of the platforming sections is that your memory will sometimes just go out of the picture if you don't grind this consistently. So that's another thing to note pretty immediately. So I can stand in the middle for most of these, with the exception of that one. So I think, oh, never mind. It's the next one. This one's just hammer slash. Yep. Pretty good. And now we're introduced to bees. Very fortunately, you do not actually have to kill that enemy, which is convenient. You can leave it be. It's one of the rare examples of where we get to save the animals. Save the animals, yeah. And now we got a lot of hammer slashing. It's really, really efficient for these groupings of 3 or more stormtroopers, because it's a battering ram. And after a few hammer slashes, we're going to move on to force splitting here. This is one of the first sections where you want to have your awareness on for that one. Because on those later sections, you will have a few sections where you will not get any warning as to when the spinning platforms appear. And we'll need to go for some force healing this time. We just need to make sure that we're ready for these last 2 platforms. One of them is a cutscene, which should be this one. It should be, yes. Yes, it is. Okay. That could have ended a lot uglier. So to play it safe, you could go for like a alternation between different killing techniques for this one. Now this one, you want to be ready with your lightsaber. And then force splits these last ones. And that should be the end of that. That was really good for a Endor section. Not too bad. There were parts that I were taking slower, but I did not fall into any platforms. And that can sometimes happen. And it's always fun when it does. So we're going to do our best to just hammer blow every single one of these. There we go. One of the very rare cutscenes where you just have to know that that's coming up. Go for the double jump. Uppercut, hammer slash, uppercut, and one more uppercut. And now we get a lot of force blitzing. This section is really difficult as a casual, but once you realize you need to blitz here, then it becomes free. We'll do a bit of healing. That should be the end of that section. That is another dangerous section as a casual, but there really is only one more seriously dangerous section in this game. And it's this section after the current one that we're in. And it has to do with one thing: HP management. Which we're going to be doing some managing right now. We're not going to get it all, but just enough to make it through alive. We'll see if the blaster bullets strike me. Yeah, they will. So we need to double jump that one. If they got despawned, we could sort of get away with not having to jump, but we have to. This is the last blitz section right here. We're going to do a bit of healing here. And then I'm going to purposefully just delay my... That's the last dangerous section. And now we're going to lose all our force. And we're done with that section. So now we got one more fight left to go. This was a pretty fun run, and that's just with the small number of major mistakes that I made here and there, especially in episode 4. When I'm well warmed up and well trained for this, and I get into focus a lot when I have a purpose to run this. Like when I have somebody who is on my tail for world record attempts at that higher level, the speed movement looks even more exciting than it already is. So imagine what I'm doing now, but at an even higher level. If this gets accepted into a marathon, of course. Regardless, we got one more fight to go through. This has 3 different sequences, and in this first sequence, Vader puts up a lot of resistance, and you kind of just have to batter your way through it. It will either go slow or really fast. This next one's just a spin slash, a hammer slash, or 2. And you make it onto the third sequence. And that third sequence is just forming a vulnerability for Vader, and then just uppercutting to the ends of the earth. Which we're going to have particular patterns for that. And this fight is not bad, it just depends on how much resistance Vader provides. And then you can just get these series of hammer slashes and uppercuts until the end, like so. So there you go, folks. Just a bit more text to go through, with the timing, of course, being on the final picture of the Ewok celebration. So, gonna kind of scroll our way through that as quickly as possible. Oh, we'll let that all play out as such. And time's coming up right now. And it was under 109, so not even half bad. Originally, the world record was just a little bit faster than this before I cut it down by another 3 minutes, so yeah. And that would be what a run of Trench Run Skip would kind of look like. And I'd say, with a little bit of practice, average runs could be around 106 and 107. So that was not a bad run. Looked pretty good. You got to see a bit of a demonstration about each of the blaster and lightsaber battle sections occur. Bit of an idea of just how high octane the platforming is. Bit of an idea of how the platforming works in perspective to each of the sections in the map that you're on, and just sort of having anticipation for when to play it safe in certain sections where you can go all out on others. So it's a fun little game where you get to sort of balance, where you go crazy and just showcase like Luke Skywalker's power as a Jedi, and others where you get to show a Jedi's restraints, like the sections where you have to be aware of there's a bottomless pit below you. Avoid the temptation to keep on dashing, or be ready with an alternate technique that allows you to not fall into the pit. So it's a lot of a balance between going fast and then going fast while going wisely fast. So I think that would be a very cool sort of speedrun to showcase to a marathon like Awesome Games Done Quick 2024, which is why I'm submitting it for consideration. So I'd like to thank those of you who are reviewing through the game. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll be looking forward to what the results are, just like every other year. So I'll have a few other runs in the links below, showing other what other runs look like the some of the marathon runs I've done in the past, current world records, recent runs. So you'll have a variety of different examples of what can happen in the game, and what other good sections can look like. So, thank you very much. That'll be it for me.